Human immunity. Infection occurs when the body is invaded by pathogens that use the body for sustenance, reproduction or colonisation and can rapidly multiply. Disease can be transmitted through direct contact, indirect contact, insect bites and food contamination. Direct contact is person-to-person contact such as touching, kissing and sexual contact. Indirect transmission refers to an infected person spreading the illness to another by air, surfaces or other mechanisms. For example, droplet transmission happens when a droplet from coughing, sneezing or talking carries the pathogen to the host and is completed by inhaling droplets. Droplets enter in the mucous membranes or the host touching settled droplets and then touching their face. Measures can be put in place to stop the spread of the disease. For example, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, local, national and international lockdowns were in place globally. Social distancing and mask wearing became a social norm and people were encouraged to stay home and not to socialise outside of their own household to stop transmission. The body has 3 lines of defence, which we will cover over the next few slides. The first line of defence is innate, comprised of physical barriers to infection, namely the skin and mucous membranes. The skin is the largest organ of the human body and it consists of 3 layers, the epidermis, dermis and subcutaneous layers. It's waterproof mechanical barrier and as long as the skin remains unbroken, it plays a vital and effective role in the first line of defence. Mucous membranes line the surface of the eyes, ears and nose amongst others and are the primary interface between external and internal environment. They are coated with secretions that fight microorganisms and form effective defence against infection. For example, the eyes are bathed in tears which contain lysozyme, which attacks bacteria and protects the eye from infection. Mucous membranes stop the pathogens and allergens from entering the body but allow in the nutrients. A further example is the prevalence of UTIs in females due to the shorter urethra and proximity of the urethral opening to the anus and the vagina. A second line of defence is the body's inflammatory response system. Injury and infection often causes an inflammatory response, which is an array of cellular events and a major component of the innate immune system's response to damage or infection. Once the process begins, it will continue until the underlying infection or injury has healed. Pathogen will enter the body through a wound. The platelets from the blood release blood clotting proteins at the wound site. Cells secrete factors that mediate vascular dilation and constriction, and the delivery of plasma, blood and cells into the injured area is therefore increased. Neutrophils secrete factors to kill and degrade pathogens, and they, along with macrophages, remove pathogens by phagocytosis. The main symptoms of an inflammatory response are the tissues taking on a red coloration in the area and becoming warm to the touch due to the increase of blood at the site. The tissues become swollen and due to this can cause pain due to the inflammation causing mechanical pressure to be applied to the nerve cells. A fever, which is a temporary rise in core body temperature, can also occur and the heat can have an antibiotic effect. Pus will also be produced, which is actually the debris of the fight against the infection and largely made up of dead neutrophils. Phagocytosis is essentially cell eating, so think of it as the Pac-Man of the immune system, as it engulfs, digests and destroys damaged, defective or invasive cells. When inflammation occurs, monocytes undergo a series of changes to become macrophages, specialised cells that can modify themselves to form different structures in order to combat specific infections. They recognise, engulf and destroy target cells, and once engulfed, cellular enzymes inside the macrophage destroy the ingested particles. Acquired immunity is gained over a lifetime through encountering pathogens, either through day-to-day life or via vaccination. It then breaks down into active or passive. Actively acquired immunity refers to the response to pathogens that the body encounters over a lifetime. Active, naturally acquired immunity is gained from the antibodies that are self-developed by the body in response to disease or infection. Actively artificial acquired immunity comes from vaccination, where the body's intentionally exposed to a latent version of a disease to develop antibodies prior to encountering the disease in a natural environment. Both types of active immunity develop over time, but they tend to last a lifetime once established. Passive immunity is gained from antibodies we receive from elsewhere. Naturally, passive acquired immunity is gained from antibodies received through the placenta or a mother's milk, which is generally protecting the infant for the first 6 months of life. Artificially passive acquired immunity is gained through antibodies received from medicines such as antibodies, antitoxins and antivenoms, neutralising a toxin or a venom or fighting a condition with antibiotics such as strep throat. Unlike active immunity, passive immunity, both natural and artificial, is fast working but doesn't last very long. Acquired immunity is categorised as specific immunity because the immune system tailors the attack to specific antigens that the body has previously encountered. It's the body's ability to learn, adapt and remember. This is the third line of defence and is essential in protecting against a varied range of infectious agents to which the body is exposed. Acquired immune system is responsible for the destruction of the pathogens once they enter the body. In the first exposure, they learn how to attack and destroy the pathogen. So as a result, it's initially ineffective against infections not previously encountered. However, once it's created, a response to a protective response can be made quicker and with greater force in the future, allowing protection. Pathogens are infectious agents, a microbe that causes an immune response. They can be bacteria, virus, fungi or protozoans. Basically anything that's too small to be seen by the naked eye that can cause an infection is termed as a pathogen. As per the slide, different types of pathogen can cause different illnesses. So we can see that bacteria, which is a small single-celled organism, can cause strep throat through the Streptococcus bacteria, and COVID-19 can be caused by a virus. Viruses are smaller than bacteria and they're not technically alive, so they need a host to replicate and survive, and antibiotics do not work against viruses. Figure 9 shows the differences between antigens and pathogens. Antigens are part of the pathogen that tell your body it's being attacked and they trigger an immune response in the body. That can be a protein, carbohydrate, fat or any other type of molecule. The pathogen needs the antigen to infect the body in the first instance. However, their need to have the antigen will trigger the body's response to recognise the pathogen and then stop the infection. White blood cells or leukocytes are a key element of the immune system and they're involved in defending the body against infection. They're not a single type of cell, they're 5 different leukocytes. All of them are produced in the bone marrow. The neutrophils are the most common. They're medium in size with irregular nuclei and many granules that perform various functions in the cells. They attach to the walls of the blood vessels, blocking the passageway, and they are the first to reach the site of the breach. They kill germs through phagocytosis, as earlier discussed, and they release bursts of oxides to kill many pathogens at once. Monocytes are the largest of the leukocytes, and they have few granules in the cytoplasm and turn into macrophages when they exit the bloodstream. Eosinophils are important in allergies and worm infestations, working by releasing toxins from granules to kill pathogens, and a high eosinophil count is linked to an allergic reaction. Basophils are the least frequent leukocyte and they have very large granules and secrete anticoagulants and antibodies. They contain histamine to dilate the vessels and bring more cells to the area. And lastly, lymphocytes are small round cells with a large nucleus and a small amount of cytoplasm. They key in antibody production and they take up resistance in the lymphatic tissues, which leads us on to T and B cells. So when the body requires a more specific and sophisticated attack on invading pathogens, it turns to its T and B cells. They're a line of defence that uses past behaviours and interactions to learn to recognise specific threats and when they appear. T and B lymphocyte cells are the only cells in the organism able to recognise and respond specifically. B cells can transform into plasmacytes and are responsible for producing antibodies. Humoral immunity depends on the B cells. The B cells produce Y-shaped antibodies that are specific to each antigen, locking onto the surface of an invading cell and marking it for destruction by the other immune cells, while cell immunity depends on the T cells. T cells fall into 2 main types: helper T cells, which stimulate B cells to produce the antibodies and aid development of the killer T cells. Killer T cells will directly kill any cells that have already been infected. They use cytokines as a messenger molecule to send chemical instructions to the rest of the immune system to speed up the response. Immunoglobulins, or Igs, are antibodies made by leukocytes. A normal Ig consists of 2 heavy chains called A, D, E, G and M, and 2 light chains, kappa and lambda. Igs are named after the heavy chain. In any Ig, the 2 heavy chains and 2 light chains are identical, creating 2 identical antigen binding sites. They have varying polypeptide formations, allowing unique function dependent on the response required. IgG is the most common, stimulating attack on and ethan pose no risk to the body. G is the only antibody that can pass through the placenta, protecting the fetus and thus the newborn baby from pathogens it will not have developed acquired immunity to. IgA defends the areas with a mucous surface, for example the nose. IgM is compiled of 5 monomer Igs and is the first of the Igs to encounter the antigen, and IgD acts as the antigen receptor for B cells. Self-recognition is the body's ability to distinguish between self and non-self, and the immune system achieves this through the mechanism of antigens. There's 2 major factors allowing differentiation: major histocompatibility complexes, MHC 1 and 2, and human leukocyte antigens. When the immune system encounters an antigen with an MHC on the surface, it won't attack or signal attack as it's recognised as itself. When it encounters a new antigen, it will recognise it as a non-self and it will trigger a response of the adaptive immune system. The human immune system isn't consistent in this response, and so it'll vary depending on the similarities between the new antigen itself, meaning that if a new antigen is similar, there might be a weaker response, whereas if it's totally different, there'll be a stronger response. MHC are a group of genes that code for the production of histocompatibility antigens on the external surface of all nucleated cells, meaning it's a way for immune systems to distinguish itself and non-self through antigens. All cells have MHC markers. Class 1 are found on nucleated cells and class 2 are found on B cells, T cells and macrophages. Any non-self cells will be attacked by the immune system, and self cells are only attacked if they're infected and could harm the cell. Self-tolerance is the phenomenon of the immunological non-reactivity to self cells. When it fails, it can lead to autoimmune diseases. Self-tolerance can be divided into 2 mechanisms: the central tolerance and peripheral tolerance. The central tolerance occurs in the organ of maturation for the respective lymphocyte, and the thymus for T cells, and the bone marrow for B cells. And the peripheral tolerance is occurring outside of the organ at the site of the antigen recognition, where T and B cells would begin to provoke an immune response. Autoimmune diseases are the result of failure of the self-tolerance system, examples being inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, which is a term for 2 conditions, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. It is an autoimmune disease that's characterised by chronic inflammation of the GI tract, and prolonged inflammation can lead to damage to the GI tract. Crohn's affects any part of the GI tract from the mouth to the anus, when the damaged areas appear in patches, whereas ulcerative colitis is in the large intestine and the rectum, and the damaged areas are continuous. Common symptoms of IBD are chronic diarrhea, rectal bleeding, abdominal pain, weight loss and fatigue. The exact cause is unknown, but it is a result of a weakened immune system, and it can be managed with medications such as immunomodulators or surgery. We also have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an immune disorder which causes hypothyroidism. So in sufferers, when the immune system makes up antibodies, they attack the thyroid gland, and a large number of white blood cells build up in the thyroid, damaging the thyroid so it can't produce thyroid hormones. Now, thyroid hormones control how your body uses energy, so an underactive thyroid can affect nearly every single organ in your body. Hypothyroidism, when left untreated, can lead to high cholesterol, high blood pressure, mixed edema, heart disease or heart failure. And the symptoms are fatigue, weight gain, inability to tolerate the cold, muscle and joint pain, constipation, fertility problems and irregular menstrual periods. It can be managed with levothyroxine. So the immune system itself is a powerful barrier to the transplant process. Development effective mechanisms to combat foreign agents. Nucleated cells in the body have self markers on the surface to identify the cell as part of the self, and the recipient's immune system will notice the new organ is different, and it will cause the immune system to attack in the form of rejection. However, if the organ's closely matched, it can prevent rejection, and tissue typing ensures the organ matched is as close as possible. However, unless the match comes from an identical twin, it is not possible to have identical antigens. There's 3 types of rejection: hyperacute, which occurs in the first few minutes when the antigens are completely unattached; acute, which occurs anytime from 1 week to 3 months, and all organ recipients will have some amount of acute rejection; and chronic, which takes place over many years, and it's the body slowly damaging the new organ. So, for example, in acute rejection of a kidney transplant, a medication called methylprednisolone can be given to suppress the rejection process. However, in chronic rejection, there is no treatment, and it will lead to kidney failure, and thus the patient will require further transplant or dialysis. So now we'll move on to the power of the vaccine. So how do vaccines actually work? Vaccines have portions of proteins called antigens. Antigens stimulate cells in the immune system, including macrophages, T cells and B cells, kickstarting an immune response as previously covered. The vaccination is considered the safest way to protect against infectious disease through injecting a small amount of a harmless form of the disease to allow the body to create antibodies so that the disease is countered naturally. The body already has the antibodies in place to fight it. Vaccinated people will have a level of immunity or protection from the disease, and the vaccine is extremely effective. For example, the childhood immunisation programme is effective in 85 to 95% of children who receive all of the vaccines. There's different types of vaccines and they're all listed here. However, we're just going to discuss two of them, the live vaccine and inactivated vaccine. So as the name suggests, inactivated vaccines use a killed version of the disease. They're not as strong as the live vaccine and they do not usually provide immunity in one dose. You need boosters for ongoing immunity. Live vaccines use a weakened version of the disease-causing germ. They're similar to the natural infection and will create a strong and long-lasting immune response. 1 or 2 doses of most live vaccines will give you a lifetime of protection, but they do come with limitations because it does contain a live virus, so those with autoimmune diseases and transplant patients, etc., are not able to have the vaccines. The benefits of the vaccines, well, they provide the body and therefore the individual with protection from a variety of diseases. For example, for children, there's the childhood IMS schedule in the UK, which starts from 8 weeks of age to the age of 14. One of the childhood IMS is against polio, and the number of cases have decreased by over 99% since 1988, from an estimated 350,000 cases in 1988 to 22 cases in 2017, the reduction being the result of a global effort to eradicate the disease. There's no cure for polio, so it can only be prevented, and given multiple doses of the polio vaccine through childhood can protect the child for life. Vaccines are of the utmost importance and they save the NHS money through the prevention of illness, making any cases that do arise more manageable in man-hour and resources. For example, COVID-19 vaccination drive was the largest in British history and was established at an unprecedented speed with thousands of vaccine centres set up rapidly in the UK. The vaccine programme was deemed a phenomenal success with almost 120 million doses administered across the UK, saving countless lives and reducing an immense amount of pressure on the NHS. Vaccines can also help prevent antibiotic resistance, extend life expectancy and promote herd immunity. So moving on to herd immunity, what is it? Well, herd immunity happens when a large number of people in a community develop immunity to a disease, and this can happen naturally or through vaccination. The idea is based on the thought that as a community, the most vulnerable can be protected. Those who can't receive vaccines due to weakened immune systems, allergies, etc., and cannot develop a natural immunity and are at risk. As seen in the COVID-19 pandemic, in the beginning of the global pandemic, no one had any immunity as it was a new virus and the cases began to rise. The survivors of the virus gained a level of immunity. Lockdowns happened globally with shielding extended for those considered clinically vulnerable, and as the vaccine was being produced, as time passed and a vaccine was introduced, more people developed immunity, reducing the numbers of those with the virus and reducing the spread to the people who could not receive the vaccines. As more people developed and continue to develop immunity to COVID-19, fewer people are ill, meaning it's more difficult for the immunocompromised, elderly and vulnerable to come into contact with COVID, stopping the spread. So vaccine uptake has been seen to decrease in recent years. There's been a slow reduction in the childhood IMS uptake, with less than 95% of children in most areas of England receiving the boosters for vaccines required by age 5. It's crucial that this is improved on to stop the spread of disease and maintain herd immunity across school settings. There was also a prominent backlash against the COVID vaccine, with many, including NHS staff, refusing to have the vaccine, even the government announcing that you would lose your job if you were unvaccinated NHS member of staff by April the 1st, 2022. However, this caused mass controversy and it was revoked and sidelined. There's been a rise in anti-vaxxers, and this is influenced largely by social media, scaremongering and people turning to the internet or friends and family for advice rather than medical professionals. Social media allows individuals to rapidly create and share content globally without editorial oversight and largely based on misinformation. For example, COVID-19 became the focus of intense social media discourse, with Twitter reporting a COVID-19 related tweet every 45 milliseconds and the hashtag coronavirus becoming the most second used in 2020. Conspiracy theories continue to circulate, leading to mass information, and the WHO have identified vaccine hesitancy as a major threat to global health. Some may be put off by the side effects also, such as cold symptoms, or in the case of COVID-19, the possibility of a blood clot or anaphylaxis.